Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. A sweeping cinematic montage unfolds, untamed rivers, towering peaks, and endless plains, all set to a powerful orchestral score. The screen fades to black before a single voice asks, "You've heard of Lewis and Clark, but have you heard of the young native woman who made their journey possible?" As her silhouette appears against the backdrop of a vast wilderness, the mystery of Sacagawea begins to unfold. Was she merely a guide, or something far more significant in one of America's greatest expeditions? In this video, we dive deep into the life and legacy of Sacagawea, the Shoshone woman whose presence shaped the fate of the Corps of Discovery. From her early capture to her pivotal role in negotiating safe passage and interpreting languages, we'll uncover the myths, the truths, and the enduring impact she left on American history. Along the way, we'll explore how her story has been remembered, romanticized, and sometimes misunderstood. This is more than just history. It's the untold story of resilience, courage, and influence. Sacagawea was born around 1788 to the Shoshone tribe in what is now Idaho, a member of the Lemhi Band. Her early years were shaped by the traditions, skills, and survival knowledge of her people, who lived in the rugged mountain regions of the American West. But her childhood was cut short around the age of 12 when she was kidnapped by a raiding party from the Hidatsa tribe, fierce rivals of the Shoshone. Taken hundreds of miles away to a Hidatsa village near present-day North Dakota, Sacagawea was forced into a new world, one where she was no longer free. Sometime later, her fate took another dramatic turn. She became the wife of Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian fur trapper and trader, either through a sale or by being won in a gambling bet. Accounts vary. She was likely no more than a teenager when this happened. Life with Charbonneau was complex and likely difficult, but it placed her at a crucial intersection between Native and European American cultures at a time of dramatic transformation on the continent. To understand Sacagawea's life is to recognize the immense challenges faced by Native American women during the early 19th century. They lived in a world shaped by colonial expansion, cultural upheaval, and violence. Yet within that world, women like Sacagawea held knowledge and skills of the land, of languages, of diplomacy that would prove invaluable in ways no one could have predicted. In the winter of 1804, as the Lewis and Clark expedition prepared for its long journey westward, they set up camp near the Hidatsa Mandan villages along the Missouri River. Knowing they would need interpreters to communicate with native tribes they'd encounter, particularly the Shoshone, Lewis and Clark enlisted Toussaint Charbonneau as a translator. But it quickly became clear that it wasn't Charbonneau who was the true asset. It was Sacagawea. Fluent in both Shoshone and Hidatsa, with a growing understanding of French through Charbonneau, she became an irreplaceable linguistic bridge for the Corps of Discovery. What made her involvement even more extraordinary was her condition. Sacagawea was pregnant at the time she joined the expedition. In February 1805, just weeks before the Corps would depart, she gave birth to her son, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, nicknamed Pomp by William Clark. Despite her recent childbirth and the grueling demands of the journey ahead, Sacagawea carried on, joining the expedition with her newborn in tow. Her presence on the expedition was more than symbolic. Not only could she communicate with the Shoshone, whose horses were crucial for crossing the Rocky Mountains, but her role as a young woman traveling with an infant also helped signal to wary tribes that the Corps was not a war party. As the Westward Expedition moved westward into increasingly unfamiliar and dangerous terrain, Sacagawea's value grew, not just as a translator, but as a calming presence and a symbol of peace. As the Corps of Discovery pushed deeper into the uncharted West, Sacagawea's contributions became essential to the success and survival of the expedition. She served as an interpreter, helping the captains communicate with various native tribes. But her role went far beyond translating words. She often acted as a cultural diplomat, helping to build trust and smooth over potentially volatile encounters. Her deep understanding of native customs and her calm, composed demeanor helped guide the group through unfamiliar and sometimes hostile territory. Sacagawea also had a practical knowledge of the land that proved invaluable. She identified edible plants, roots, and berries, often helping feed the hungry expedition when supplies ran low. Her ability to recognize terrain features and waterways allowed the Corps to make smarter navigation choices. In moments of crisis, like when a boat tipped in the Missouri River, she rescued important journals and supplies, proving not just her skill, but her bravery and commitment to the mission. Perhaps the most extraordinary moment of the journey came when the expedition reached the lands of the Shoshone. In a stunning twist of fate, Sacagawea discovered that the chief of the tribe they encountered was her own brother, Kamiawait. Their emotional reunion not only underscored the personal cost of her abduction years earlier, but also became a turning point in the expedition. Because of their sibling bond, the Shoshone agreed to provide the much-needed horses and guidance that allowed the Corps to cross the treacherous Rocky Mountains. Without that moment, without her, Lewis and Clark's journey might have ended there. Throughout the long and dangerous passage west, Sacagawea remained a steady and resilient figure. With her infant son on her back, she walked thousands of miles through harsh wilderness, not as a bystander, but as a critical member of one of the most famous explorations in American history. Over the years, Sacagawea's story has grown into legend, so much so that separating fact from fiction can be a challenge. Popular portrayals in books, films, and even statues often depict her as the fearless guide who heroically led Lewis and Clark across an untamed continent. But the historical record tells a more nuanced and arguably more impressive story. One of the most persistent myths is that Sacagawea was the expedition's main guide. In truth, she did not chart the course or lead the group in the way professional scouts might have. While she occasionally pointed out familiar landmarks and helped navigate in certain areas, her primary role was not directional leadership. Instead, her importance lay in her ability to serve as a cultural bridge, interpreting languages, easing tensions with tribes, and showing that the Corps was not a threat. Her presence alone, as a woman with a child, was a powerful diplomatic tool in a time when armed groups were often viewed with deep suspicion. Hollywood has also contributed to a romanticized image of Sacagawea, portraying her as stoic, exotic, or overly submissive. These depictions often strip away the complexity of her experience. The fact that she was a young, indigenous woman taken from her home, thrust into a historic but grueling expedition while raising an infant. Her real-life courage lies not in cinematic heroism, but in her quiet endurance, intelligence, and resourcefulness under extraordinary circumstances. So, did she lead the expedition? Not in the traditional sense, but her contributions were no less crucial. She helped make peaceful encounters possible, secured vital resources, and endured the same brutal hardships as the rest of the Corps, all while carrying the unique weight of her own story. The reality of Sacagawea's life may be less dramatic than the myths, but it is far more powerful in its truth. After the Lewis and Clark expedition ended in 1806, Sacagawea faded from the historical spotlight, and much of her later life remains shrouded in uncertainty. Historians generally agree that she returned to the Hidatsa Mandan villages with Charbonneau and their infant son, Jean-Baptiste. For a time, the family lived near present-day North Dakota, and in 1811, records suggest they may have traveled to St. Louis, where William Clark had offered to oversee Jean-Baptiste's education. One version of events, based on trading post records and an 1812 journal entry, holds that Sacagawea died at Fort Manuel in what is now South Dakota, likely from illness, possibly typhus at the young age of 24. This account was accepted for many years by most scholars. However, a competing oral tradition from the Shoshone and some 19th century accounts claim that Sacagawea left Charbonneau, returned to her people in Wyoming, and lived a long life until her death in 1884, reportedly buried on the Wind River Reservation. This version paints a picture of a woman who reclaimed her identity and heritage, though it's difficult to verify. As for her son, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau led an extraordinary life. After Clark assumed guardianship of him, he received a solid education and, as a teenager, traveled to Europe with a German prince. Fluent in multiple languages and deeply familiar with both native and European cultures, Jean-Baptiste became a true frontiersman, serving as a guide, interpreter, gold prospector, and explorer in his own right. His adventurous life mirrored the spirit of the expedition he was born into. While Sacagawea's exact fate may remain a mystery, her legacy lived on through her son, through the stories passed down by her people, and through the impact she had on a pivotal moment in American history. Sacagawea's legacy has grown far beyond the details of her life, becoming a symbol of courage, resilience, and the vital, often overlooked role of Native American women in American history. Though much about her story remains uncertain, the impact she made during the Lewis and Clark expedition has been celebrated in many ways across the United States. Numerous statues of Sacagawea stand across the country, from Oregon to Washington, D.C., often depicting her with her infant son on her back, a powerful image of strength and motherhood. In 2000, the U.S. Mint released the Sacagawea dollar coin, featuring her likeness alongside baby Jean-Baptiste. Though the coin never gained widespread use, it remains one of the few pieces of American currency to feature a Native American woman, and it serves as a quiet testament to her enduring influence. Schools, parks, and trails also bear her name, helping to keep her story alive for future generations. But beyond these honors, Sacagawea represents something deeper. She is a symbol of the countless indigenous women whose names and stories have been lost to history. Her legacy challenges us to recognize their contributions, not just in times of exploration, but throughout American history. In the face of overwhelming odds, abduction, displacement, motherhood, and the challenges of a brutal expedition, Sacagawea carried forward with courage, intelligence, and an unshakable presence. Her story reminds us that history is not just shaped by those in command, but also by those whose quiet strength helps forge the path forward. Sacagawea's story offers far more than a glimpse into a legendary expedition. It's a powerful reflection of resilience, courage, and survival against overwhelming odds. Taken from her home as a child, forced into a life she didn't choose, and thrust into one of the most demanding journeys in American history, she didn't just endure, she contributed. Her strength wasn't in wielding power, but in her ability to influence quietly, adapt rapidly, and remain steady in the face of constant uncertainty. Her journey reminds us of the critical yet often unrecognized role women have played in exploration and diplomacy. Sacagawea was not just a companion or translator, she was a peacekeeper, a cultural bridge, and a symbol of trust. Her presence allowed the expedition to move through native lands with greater safety, not through force, but through respect and understanding. At the same time, her life sits at a poignant intersection of indigenous history and American expansion. While the Lewis and Clark expedition marked a bold chapter in the story of the United States, it also foreshadowed the deep and lasting impact of westward expansion on Native peoples. Sacagawea's story stands as a reminder that the narrative of American progress is incomplete without acknowledging the voices and experiences of those who lived through it from the other side. Through her strength, sacrifice, and quiet heroism, Sacagawea leaves us with a lasting lesson. History is not just shaped by those who write it, but by those who carry its weight, mile after mile, often in silence. As we come to the end of this journey, let's take a moment to reflect on the incredible life of Sacagawea. From her early days as a Shoshone child, to her abduction and forced marriage, to her quiet strength on the legendary Lewis and Clark expedition, she walked thousands of miles, not just across a continent, but through history itself. Her presence helped secure vital alliances, calm tensions, and guide one of America's most iconic expeditions through some of the most treacherous terrain in the West. Her legacy lives on, not just in coins, statues, and school names, but in the larger conversation about who gets remembered in history and why. Sacagawea represents the strength and significance of indigenous women whose contributions were critical, yet often overlooked. She reminds us that even in the shadows of great leaders, there are figures whose impact is just as profound. Now we'd love to hear from you. What do you think was Sacagawea's greatest contribution? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story inspiring or learned something new, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history's hidden figures, and don't forget to share it with someone who'd appreciate the untold stories of the past. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.